My name is Megan Turnock. I'm your host for this event, and I'm a principal at Lees and Associates. Lees and Associates is the consulting firm that is leading the public engagement process. And I'm joined today by a few others from our team, Eric Lees and Eileen Finn from Lees, who will be facilitators. And Clive Wellham will also be a facilitator. He's from the Three Green Tree team. We also have a number of note takers from Lees tonight, and you'll meet them in the small groups. So we're joined by Clive Wellham and Brad Seeley, who are from Three Green Tree Consulting and who are bringing that forest management planning expertise to the project. They're part of the UBC Partnership Group, along with UBC and the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership. So that group is tasked with the technical review and creation of management options, which you'll hear about shortly in this introduction to the workshop. So we're looking forward to learning who you all are as well, but we'll be doing that a little bit later in the workshop in the small groups and, to consider time. I also want to, at this point, acknowledge that North Cowichan is on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people.
Megan, do you want to mention that Barb and Sean from the district are with us as well this evening?
Sure, yes, thanks, Eric. We have Barb Floden and Sean Mason here from North Cowichan. They're here to participate in the workshop as listen in on some of the discussions and to help us with some tech support if needed. So our agenda today includes a brief presentation. Then I'll introduce the workshop agenda. You don't need technical expertise to participate today, but we do want to give you a little bit more understanding about the purpose of what we're doing in the public engagement, what we're asking and why, and to tell you a little bit about how your input is going to be used. Most of our time is going to be spent in these small group discussions, because that's really what this workshop is all about. It's about hearing from you, and I'll explain the logistics of that in a little bit. At the end of the workshop, we will have the facilitators from each group just do a brief report back on some of the highlights of what was discussed in their small group, so you can hear about what others were talking about. And of course, we will be compiling all the workshop results and reporting that back to the community. So as you know, we're here to talk about the future management of the Municipal Forest Reserve. So really to start with the basics of what the MFR is, there are a few key facts. So all the various parcels of the MFR are owned and managed by the municipality. It's different than some community forests in that it's not leased or licensed from the province. This makes it a bit unique. Most community forests in BC are licensed for forestry operations as crown lands from the province. North Cowichan's forest covers about 1/4 of the municipality's land base, so it's quite substantial. So there are 5,000 hectares, and it's been managed by the municipality as a working forest since 1946, and with the goal of it being financially self-sustaining and practicing sustainable forestry. It provides multiple benefits, economic, social, and environmental. As you can see, not all the parcels on the map are contiguous. They're spread out across the municipality. In 2019, in response to public concern, including a petition signed by over 1,500 people, North Cowichan Council paused timber harvesting to allow for a public engagement process and a technical review of forest management practices. The goal of this public engagement process is to include the community in the development of the forest management options for the future. And really, Council wants to have a better understanding of the community's values and vision for the future. what do I mean when I say values? Well, there's quite a range. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. So this is a diagram of the project and showing how the public engagement process and the technical review relate to each other. There's a lot happening here, so let me point out the key pieces. So first, we're at the very beginning of this process. This is the first round of engagement, and the UBC Partnership Group has not developed any forest management scenario options yet. This first round is really our first chance to hear about your values. And we aren't even to the point of talking really about solutions or the technical considerations of how that vision and values gets implemented. This workshop is really an important part of the overall picture of the community because we'll be able to have a two-way conversation with you today. The other key piece of the engagement is an online survey. So what we hear today and through the online survey will be fed into to help UBC Partnership Group bring back some options that reflect the community's collective vision. Those options for forest management will be brought forward to the public. That's what's happening in round 2 in the spring. That's what that's going to be all about. At that point, you'll get to see what those options are, and we'll gather your input and feedback again. And then UBC Partnership Group will have the opportunity to update the scenarios based on your feedback. Those will be brought to council, and at that point, any decision on next steps will be in their hands. I'd also like to just highlight that there is a separate process going on, separate from the public engagement process. The Municipality of North Cowichan and the Cowichan Nation signed a memorandum of understanding, and that established a working group to share information about the stewardship and use of the MFR. So that's a separate process that we won't be going into today. So what's already happened? We have developed a council approved engagement plan. Lise did 20 stakeholder interviews really to give us a sense of the breadth of views in the community. And we also established an engagement working group and have had 4 meetings with that group to discuss the engagement process. From the technical standpoint, the UBC Partnership Group has made presentations to council, has worked with the Forest Advisory Committee. They also completed a study on whether the MFR could generate and sell carbon credits based on how much carbon dioxide the forest captures and holds each year. And there's more information about that carbon offset project on the municipality's website. Most relevant to our workshop today is that they have been assembling data to support the modeling work that they're going to be doing. And after one more slide here, you'll get to hear from the UBC Partnership Group directly about their work and how what you tell us today will inform what they do next. So you may be wondering, what do you mean by values and what I value about the forest? So this slide has some examples. I'm sure you can come up with a lot of your own, but just start, my suggestion is just to start your thought with, what I value about the MFR is blank and go from there. We're really here to have an open discussion though, and talk about what's important to you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brad Seeley, and he's going to take us through some of the UBC Partnership Group's work.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan. I wanted to say how nice it is to see how many people are interested in participating tonight, and I hope that we have a productive workshop here. I also wanted to point out that some of my colleagues, Dr. Peter Arcisse and Dr. Stephen Shepard, who are participating and helping with this project, are also listening in here, and they've been very valuable resources that we've been working with. So there's been a lot of work that we've been doing. I don't have a lot of time to go through it all in great detail, but I wanted to just kind of give you some highlights here. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So these are the main goals and objectives of the work that we've been doing. Clearly, we needed to take account of what's been done in the past and try to put it in context, in terms of the region and what the needs are. We really need to get an idea of what the community values and what their goals are for the municipal forest, and that's a big part of what we're doing here tonight. And we're going to use that information along with input from the forester and the other people involved in the community to develop some forest management options. I just wanted to point out it's important to note that the UBC team is not really, our goal isn't to tell the municipality what to do with the forest. It's more to help them develop and evaluate different management options. And then so one way we're doing that is we collecting information about the forest inventory, and we can use some different kinds of modeling tools, and I'll talk about that a bit more. Next slide, please. So many of you have been out on the forest reserve. You've seen things going on. Here's we've got a few slides just kind of showing some of the different management activities. This is one where I'm doing some replanting on Maple Mountain, and they put these tree collars on to protect the seedlings from deer browsing. Next slide. There's another scene with some harvesting, some active harvesting going on. And so some people, when they see harvesting activities, they're worried, about what it means for the forest and how it's going to develop and change over time. So that's something that we're going to be talking about. Next. Some of the other management activities that are going on are trying to control invasive species, particularly along disturbed areas. Things like broom and other species can get in there, and they can have adverse effects on forest productivity, and particularly for younger forests. Next slide, please. Okay, so we just wanted to kind of put this the Municipal Forest Reserve in context of a kind of the broader area. So it's part of what we call the coastal Douglas forest type, Douglas fir forest type. And if you look at the lower map there, you can kind of see the extent of it. It's much of kind of the southeastern part of Vancouver Island, but also kind of over on the western shore of the mainland there. And it's an area that's been very popular in terms of human use, right? So much of the area, much of the forest has been converted to human use, more than around 49%. And there's less than 3% of pre-settlement forests intact. And one of the reasons for this is that it's more than 80% privately owned, which is unusual for forest land in BC. And in fact, it's because of these factors, it's one of the most imperiled ecosystems in BC. One of the things we wanted to point out is that the forests within this reserve are some of the most spectacular examples of the coastal Douglas fir forest type. And many of them have been protected as part of the recreation strategies by the municipality. And one of the other thing is that there are different strategies that we can employ to continue to protect and enhance some of these forest types. Next slide. Okay, so one of the things we've been doing up until now is compiling a whole bunch of spatial data information. So about the things about where the different forest types are on the landscape, and different types of forests in general that are out there. And so we also bring information about hydrology layers, about riparian zones, about trails, and all kinds of different spatial layers come into this data set. And then we put them all together, and then we can use them to help calibrate our forest planning models. And these planning models allow us to kind of simulate different kind of management options and to see how they might impact the growth and development of the forest over time. So as you can imagine, it's pretty technical work, and we've been working with the Sean and the others at the municipality and they've been very good about sharing their data, and we've used some of those data sets to generate new data sets, and so we've made quite a bit of progress on that front. Okay, next slide. Here's just a couple of examples to show you the kind of data I'm talking about when we say spatial data. So on the far left, you can see some maps of the forest reserve showing stand age classes, with the darker blue kind of colors being the older ones and the yellower colors being more younger ones with the recent cut blocks. We also have information about different types of stands, whether they're Douglas fir or deciduous stand types, or those kinds of things, whether they've been thinned or not, for example. And then the slide on the right side is one where this slide is actually zoomed in. And this kind of illustrates the use of what we call LiDAR data, which is data that was collected by planes flying over the forest reserve and using a laser to measure tree heights. And this is important because it allows us to really kind of define where the different stand types are on the land base, and helps us to get an idea of canopy cover, tree size, and these are all things that are important for our models and also some of the values that we care about. Next slide. Okay, so one of the approaches we're taking here, so we've brought all this data together and we've got our models, but we need to know something about what we're trying to achieve with these management options. And to do that, we use this approach that we refer to as criterion indicators. And so what I mean by criteria is these are so Megan was talking about values before and some of the things that we value. And a criteria that we're talking about is just another name for a value that we're trying to identify. And so these criteria used to identify or define specific services and values associated with the forest resource. So we've already started to do this process. And so we've kind of used some traditional ones that people have used in different places. But these are open for input, and that's one of the things we're doing here today is to try to get some input to see if we've got all the criteria that are important for this group and if we're missing some things. And then the next step of this is we can use specific indicators to determine if we're actually protecting certain criteria, right? So these are ways that we can drill down a little bit and kind of measure certain criteria, or sorry, certain things within the forest so that we can use to determine if we're doing a good job protecting or for the criteria. Next slide. Okay, so as Megan mentioned at the beginning, we're in the first stage of this process here. We're really trying to identify what the values are that the community finds important. And so again, you can see that little graphic there where we talk about values linked to criteria and then criteria to indicators. And so we have specific measures within the database that we can then use to quantify how well we're doing with these specific indicators. And then the graphics that you see here are outputs from hypothetical scenarios that we could then use to quantify these different indicators. And these charts are a way to kind of show a lot of information about a whole range of indicators at one time. And so where you see green pie charts, that means that particular scenario might be doing well for that particular set of indicators or criteria. And where you see the red or yellow ones, that means yellow means that it's satisfactory, orange is maybe unsatisfactory, and red would be poor. Let's go to the next slide and I'll talk more about these. So the reason why I'm showing you these now is because one of the things that we hope to do once we get through this engagement process is we want to bring in information about these different criteria and indicators that we can then put into the models. And then we're also going to use that information to help identify and create some different alternative options that we might employ within the computer planning models so that we can simulate different kind of management scenarios. And so when we simulate those scenarios, we can project how these forests might grow and develop over time when you manage them different ways. So whether you're doing thinning or maybe you're not doing as much harvesting or you're protecting more areas, it depends, right? And so the example on the left side there would be an example of a hypothetical scenario where we're focusing more on maximizing commercial harvesting. And so you can see there's green, you're doing quite well in terms of timber revenue and some other values, but maybe not as well in terms of ecosystem carbon or bird habitat or old forests. And then if you move over to the one on the right side, this would be an alternative scenario where maybe you're focusing more on conservation. So you're not getting much revenue in terms of timber, but perhaps you could generate some revenue in terms of carbon offsets, and then you can also look at some of the other ecosystem things. Maybe you're doing a better job at protecting bird habitat in sensitive ecosystems in this type of scenario. So again, it's important to point out these are only hypothetical ones now. And there's just to illustrate how we can then use the output from the modeling tools to kind of assess how we're doing in the future on these different management options. And then that's the next step where we'll come back to the group and kind of show some of the output. And I know I covered a lot of information there, but hopefully you guys can get a better idea about that. And some of this is it's repeated again in the discussion guide. And so you can go back and learn more about it there. So I think that's all I wanted to say for today. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks a lot, Brad. That's a good, quick and dirty introduction to your process. So thanks for that.